Hello again, here with another video from the Herald Church of Christ. This video is called Sex. Many people think the Bible doesn't discuss this topic, but it talks about all sorts of different things. There's an instance in the book of Genesis where these two girls get their father drunk and have sexual relations with him. There is an instance in the New Testament in the Corinthian church where a man has sex with his stepmother. And then there's this story that we're going to go into today of a man who was the king of Israel. He was the king, his name was David, and he was walking around one day on the top of his house, and he looked over and he saw this woman. She was taking a bath, and he decided, I have to have that woman. So he sent a servant to go get her, and they brought her back to him in his palace, and he has sexual relations with her. Well, then she goes back to her house, and he's informed that her husband is Uriah, who is fighting in his army. So he calls and says, bring Uriah home. And he has a big dinner for him and lets him eat and gets him full of wine and says, go home and be with your wife. He was trying to cover it up. She had informed him that she was pregnant, informed David that she was pregnant. He was trying to cover it up. So Uriah, being a good man, said, I cannot go to my house and be with my wife when my brothers on the battlefield are dying. And he refused to do it. So what does this king do? This king says, what I'm going to do is, he writes a letter. And he tells them to take that to his commander in the army. And they took it to the commander, and he opens the letter and it says, put Uriah in the front of the heat of the battle, and when the battle's in the heat, withdraw from him so that he would get killed. And that's what they did. And then David took Bathsheba to be his wife. But Nathan the prophet comes to talk to David. And he said, King, I need to ask you a question. He said, there was a man who had all kinds of sheep. And there was another man who only had one ewe lamb. The man who had all the sheep took that one ewe lamb. What should be done to that man? He said, that man should die. David got upset of the injustice that was done. The man only had one ewe lamb. He said, that man should die. And the prophet said, that man is you, king. But God has already forgiven you. David repented, was sorry, was tore all to pieces because he had done what he done. David cried and wept, and the first child died because of that sin. The child that she was pregnant with, it was born and it ended up dying as a result of their sin. The Bible has a lot to say about sex. It tells us how to properly do it. It's to be done with one man and one woman who are married. And consequently, if we think about it, if neither one of you have any diseases and you get married and you keep your sex between the marriage, guess what happens? You don't ever get any diseases, sexually transmitted diseases. God knows what's best, and His Word is full of advice on sex and on any other topic you'd like to see. And I got a question for you. As the critic would say, well, somebody just made this book up. They just made these stories up to try to deceive you. I want you to think about this. If somebody was writing this to try to deceive you, why would they tell about a man who loved God, who took another man's wife and had the man killed? Why would they tell about a man who God delivered from a place filled with immorality, that his two daughters got him drunk and had relations with him? Why would it tell all those? Why would it tell about the person in the New Testament church in Corinth, about a man having relations with his stepmom. And Paul rebukes him for it and rebukes the church for it and says, you ought to put that man out of the church. That he'll be ashamed of what he done and want forgiveness from God. And come back and say, I did mess up. This book is from God. It has all things that pertains to life and godliness. It's got the best bedtime stories for your children. It's got the best advice when your marriage is on the rocks. It's got the best advice when you're addicted. It's got the best advice when you're struggling. And it's got the best promise that you'll ever find from a book. If you will do what it tells you to do and make Jesus Lord of your life, be buried with him in baptism, rise and walk a new person, he promises that he will come in and dwell with you and he'll teach this to you. What better promise could you have than that? Than to have the God that created the cosmos, Almighty God, come and live and dwell in you through his Spirit. If you're not a child of God today, I wish that you would be. Until the next video, keep looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith.